Hello crafters and welcome back to the ScrapbookPal YouTube channel. My name is Deepa Robbins from DeeZinesByD and today I'm sharing with you a Slimline window pop-out card. Now this card features the Spellbinders Magnolia Blooms dies and Yana Script Sentiment dies. So let's go ahead and get started and look at the products we're going to be using. As I said, this is the script dies from Yana, which are really nice. Here's the Magnolia Bloom set. These are just the dies and they are absolutely to die for. Now I'm also going to be using this Foliage set along with these Fluted rectangle set from Spellbinders here. Now these are cool dies because it does some embossing too. I'll also be using the Spellbinders silver foil along with some Copic Ciaos, and I've got my adhesives here including my Barely Art glue, my Tombow mono runner, and some Scor-Pal and foam squares. And I'll also be using the Pinkfresh Studio metallic pearls in silver. Now the first thing I want to do is grab the two largest rectangles from that Fluted rectangle slimline set, and I've taped them together with some washi tape, and this is just so that the spacing between those two dies is perfect around all of the four sides. So I'll just run that through my die cutting machine, and once I've got that rectangle, I will take the Foliage set, and I'm only going to be using the hexagons from this. So this is the smallest hexagon, and I'm going to place it in the center of that slimline rectangle to make my window. Once I run it through my machine, I can take that out, and I have that hexagon window in the center of that slimline rectangle. Now the next step is to take the plate, so this is a foiling plate, which is the hexagon shape as well. And I'm going to use some of the Spellbinders silver foil to foil that hexagon. Now what I want to do is create a nice little frame with this, and it's just going to go around the window that I just created. So all I do is I put my plate on top of the foil and on top of the cardstock. Then I set it all up in my Glimmer machine and I run it through my die cutting machine to add pressure, and you can see that I've got that beautiful hexagon all glimmered up. And now what I have to do is cut this little frame out. So I'm adding the larger frame. I've die cut that, and then I'll add the smaller frame, and then I'll die cut that as well. And as you see, I'll end up with a beautiful blue frame that is foiled in silver foil. And I'm just going to end up sticking this on top of that window that we created in the slimline panel. But for now, I'll just put that to the side and I'll start to work on my card base here. So I have a piece of cardstock. It's 8.5 inches in length, and I'm just scoring it at 3.75 inches, and that's going to be the width of the slimline card. And then all I do is then cut off the extra piece after I folded it, and there is my slimline card base. So that's how I tend to make all of my card bases. Now you can see that that panel fits on there nicely, and I've just kind of centered it because it has a little bit of a border, and I'm just marking that hexagon in the center so I can kind of see where it sits. Now all I have to do is cut that window out of the card base as well. This way we can see right through the card base into the middle of the card. So I'll line up that hexagon die again and I'll cut it out. Now remember, this is the inner hexagon, just like we did on that blue panel. Now you see if I lay it over top, it sits nicely over top right in the center of that slimline card. Now what I'll do is work on the pop-out portion of the card. So you can see again, this is the same length, 8.5 inches. And what I'm going to do is make 3 scores, one at 2.5 inches, one at 3.75 inches, and then one at 5 inches. And then after I've made those 3 scores, that's going to make sure that this piece sits right in the center of my card. I will then move it over just a little bit. You can make this little flap as big as you want. I made it about 1/4 inch, and it's just 1/4 inch from the last score. And that's just going to be like our little hinge or fold that's going to connect this to the other side of the card. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this. So from that long edge, I'm folding it one way, and then I'll fold it back the other way in an accordion fashion. So this is what's going to create that kind of pop out fold that's going to allow that center piece to stick through the window of the front of the card. Now here I'm folding that little flap. As I said, this will function as the hinge. And because I have like an opening in the window, part of that hinge is not going to be required. So if you see here, I line this up with the card. This is how it's going to sit. I fold down that piece and I fold over the front. You can see that the part where the window shows through, that little flap is going to stick out. We don't need that. So I'm actually just cutting that off. So I'll open that up and I'll just use my my cutting tool here to just cut off that little flap because you're not going to need it. It's going to be sticking through the window and you don't really want that. Well, actually, it'll probably get covered up, but this just makes it a little easier. So there we go. My hinges are actually attached to my panel and I don't really have to worry too much about creating them because they're already there. Now the next step is to add some strong adhesive. So I recommend some double-sided Scor-Pal tape, and I'm putting it on the bottom edge of that big flap right along the crease and then also on those two little hinges that we created. Now what I'll do is I'll kind of line it up. Well, before I line it up, this is my trick. I love doing this because it allows me some wiggle room. So I'm using my Tombow adhesive, and before I've lifted up the backing of that strong adhesive, I use the Tombow to glue it down. And when I do this, I still have a bit of room because, you know, the Tombow is not so strong. It's strong, but not so strong that it's permanent right away. So I get it exactly where I want it. And then I kind of go in between the two pieces of paper and peel off the backing of that double-sided Scor-Pal tape. Now I've got it on there nice and good and it's not going anywhere. I'll do the same thing with the two little hinges and I'll fold over the front of the card. And there you go. You've got your folding over flap here. That's going to allow that little pop-out window to work. Now to work on our Magnolia blooms. So I'm getting the die out, which is really intricate. So I do want to note that when you're doing this step, go ahead and make sure you have the right sandwich. Maybe get another metal shim and put it underneath as you run it through your die cutting machine. And I went ahead and went back and forth. So what I do here is you can see that it hasn't fully cut through. So what I did was I went and added my shim. I put that through a few times through my die cutting machine and I ended up with this beautiful intricate image. I have to say that I was absolutely stunned when I saw these. Once you get all of those little pieces out of there, which isn't too hard once you have the right shims, it is stunning. So the next thing you want to do is cut out those white pieces with the outline die. So this is going to create the backing for these beautiful intricate little frames of magnolias. And once I've got that on my white backing, I kind of use my acrylic block to stick it down. Now once that's done, so I made two of those, I'm going to take my Copic Ciaos and just add some color to these magnolias. And I'm using a bunch of, well, not a bunch, actually 3 colors of pink. And then I'm also going to use my Colorless blender because I don't want this to be like a really dark pink. I want it to be really light and subtle. And then I want the pink to kind of blend out into the white. And that Zero Colorless blender is what helps you do that. So I'm not doing any fancy coloring here. I'm using the flicking technique and I'm just kind of flicking out from the center of the flower with the darkest color, and then I'll fade it into the lightest color and out into the white with the Colorless blender. And all I'm doing is keeping the darkest color in towards the center of the flower and then maybe underneath any of the parts of the petals that kind of fold that would create a shadow. And then again, you have this little bud that's sticking out of the top. Now you want to add the most color to this because the leaves are kind of closed and like closer together, so they probably have a bit more shadow to them. So once I've gone ahead and colored this beautiful magnolia, I also colored the second one. And then I went to my script sentiments. Now these are really nice because they're a beautiful script. I love the font, and on top of that they're nice and thin, so they're delicate just like the magnolia blooms. Now I did this in white cardstock because I wanted to add the same color as the magnolias. So what I did was I took the negative piece of the cardstock after I cut it out and I added some washi tape to the back so that I could stick the die cut back into that negative space. And now I'm just adding color with my Copic Ciaos. So I'm starting with the darkest color at the bottom, then I'll blend out with a bit of the lighter color, and then the lightest color right at the top. So I'm not using the Zero Copic Ciao for this because I have the lightest color of the pink to kind of blend the colors out. So here you see I'm adding that lightest color, and I'm just going to go over the rest of the image or the rest of the wording to just blend out all of those colors. Now that looks like a mess until you take it out and you see you've got a nicely blended sentiment here. Now I also did this for the birthday, so I used the happy birthday sentiment and I added another layer on top behind that. And then behind that, I also added a third layer, which was cut out of the same silver cardstock that I used for the Magnolias. So this is tying in that metallic portion of the card to the sentiments. So this is, as I said, these are delicate sentiments. So again, I find that using an acrylic block to kind of add weight and push those down really helps me get them glued together well. Now I have that little octagon, which, no, sorry, not octagon, hexagon that I had cut out from the front of the card. Remember the card base? So now I'm going to use this piece to make out my pop out for the window. So I've added my Magnolia on top of there and I've just glued it down with some Barely Art glue. And you can see that I've cut off the edges and it just makes a really nice Magnolia window. So the next step is to actually add this to my card in the window space that I created. Now I added some of that double-sided tape to the edges of that little flap in the center. And then I added some Tombow mono adhesive as well, just to kind of add a bit more and make sure it's on there nice and well. I've put it in the center there and you can see it folds out nicely. Now I do want to add that hexagon, before I added the Magnolia, I did cut down the edges just a tiny little bit so that when I open and close the card, it's not going to touch the edges of the outer hexagon. Now I went ahead and I added that foiled hexagon frame to the front of that blue panel. And now I'm going to add that blue panel to the front of the card, spacing it just so that the window is fully open and that little pop out bit, the little pop out hexagon, is not going to touch the edges and kind of get ruined. So before I put together the rest of the card, I actually took a bit of washi tape and put it around the edge to hold it flat. And then I took the other Magnolia that I had colored and I added a bunch of foam squares. Now I love these foam squares, which are also available in the scrapbook store, because they have larger squares and smaller squares, and it just works for different areas of your die cuts like this one. So again, I stuck it on the top corner and cut off the edges, and those edge pieces that I cut off are still good to work on the card. So I took another of those pieces that I cut off and put it on the bottom left corner. So there I'm using up all of my Magnolia and I'm not throwing anything away. Furthermore, I attached these beautiful sentiments to the front. And again, because they're intricate, you're going to have to kind of hold them down or use an acrylic block to weigh them down so that they're glued on nice and well. Now here are the rest of all of those Magnolia pieces that I cut off. Don't waste them. You can use them on the inside of your card, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. So I'm just kind of lining them up on the edges and different areas of the card where I see fit, where I want to put them. It's completely up to you how you want to do this. And I'm just attaching them right flat to the card with my Barely Art glue. You could use some foam tape and maybe prop some of those up as well. It's completely up to you how you want to do this. So now I'll just embellish the front of the card with those Pinkfresh Studio metallic pearls. Now I have to say that, sometimes these embellishments, they only come in like one size. I love this pack because there are tons of different sizes. There's a big, medium, small, and I think there's also a 4th size in there as well. And there is the final product. I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial and that you were inspired to use these products to create some cards of your own. The featured die sets are available in the ScrapbookPal store, and they are just absolutely stunning. Beyond anything else, I absolutely love those Magnolia blooms. And this, along with the rest of the supplies used in this video, are listed in the description below. Please don't forget to subscribe to the ScrapbookPal YouTube channel and hit that notification bell to be notified of future tutorials. Have a great day, and I hope to see you all again next time. Bye!